Knowing this near universal pattern helps to assess new brands and existing ones.
What don't marketers know?
Quite a lot. Marketers largely live in an anything-goes world where the latest fashion or fad drives an awful lot of practice.
Segmentation is the recognition you can't serve everyone with equal satisfaction.
This is the Zac Anesbury Show.
Welcome. On today's podcast, we have Dr. Jason Pallant. Now, I first met Jason at an ANZMAC conference that was being held in Christchurch, New Zealand, about 3 years ago now. And when I met Jason, I thought to myself, this guy looks like he's going places. Now, Jason recently hosted me for a presentation that I gave at Swinburne University, and afterwards we sat down to record this podcast. You will hear about how Jason has a strong psych background, and given his mum's famed statistical abilities, I mean, she literally wrote the instruction manual, he managed to find his way into academia. Now, we talk at length about being an early career researcher and especially the joys of supervising and mentoring the young brains within our field. But without further ado, Dr. Jason Pallant. Excellent. So welcome to the podcast, Jason. Thanks for taking time out of your day to speak to us all. So did you want to just provide us with a bit of an overview as to who you are and a bit of your background?
Sure. So I'm Dr. Jason Pallant. I am currently a lecturer in marketing at Swinburne Business School, which is down in Melbourne. I've been here just over 2 years. Prior to that, I was working as a research fellow at Monash in a group formerly known as the Australian Centre for Retail Studies. And when I left there, I was the Associate Director of Research. And so that group did a lot of industry-applied research, worked with a lot of industry partners and a lot of funded consulting projects. And I decided after I finished my PhD that I wanted to shift to a more traditional academic role, so learning and teaching. Teaching and research. So I've got a teaching load now and also doing research at the same time. It's going well so far.
Excellent. So you just mentioned that being in academic, there is a bit of a balance between having a research load and a teaching load. And then you also have to find time somewhere in between that to try to focus on, engaging with industry. And I've noticed some of the more clever researchers in our field have managed to make sure all three sort of feed into each other. Is that something you've found? Or
Yeah, so something that's interesting about Swinburne and what attracted me to this uni and this role is that our workload and our research performance directly requires us to have engagement with industry. So we can't be research intensive, if you will, with just academic publications or just academic work. We are expected or highly encouraged, let's say, to be doing work with industry partners that's either generating income or is having some kind of engagement, communication through the media with the public, or increasingly as well social impact. So wanting us to do research that is making a difference in the community. And as you said, I think the best way to do that is to combine all of those those activities.
100%.
If you're researching in an area that is interesting to and relevant to industry or the community, I think, and you can do that in a rigorous way. You can do that in a way that is then going to tick the boxes of engagement, hopefully funding, and then publications in the academic sphere as well.
Yeah. So I kind of have, that sort of makes me think about two different things in terms of, how does Swinburne University work? Because a lot of the people who are listeners to this podcast are either in industry and so don't really have a general sense about how academic sort of life works or what our priorities are. Or those who are in academia may work in very different models or have different groups. So a bit of a time allocation for a traditional lecturer, I suppose, would be 40% teaching, 40% research, and 20% kind of engagement / admin-y type stuff. Is that a similar model for Swinburne?
It's interesting. So the answer is it depends. The way that we have a sliding scale model, meaning that the research allocation that you are given is directly dependent on your performance and your past performance. And
the research side of things.
Correct.
Okay.
And so the research side of things looks at your traditional academic outputs. Yep. So think journal articles, book chapters or books if they're certain publishers and that kind of thing. But your traditional academic outputs, it weights that equally with industry engagement, which is judged based on income. Okay. So it's not just commercial income. That includes like government grants as well. Yep. And then there's also a little bit of that which is impact. So if you can demonstrate that something that you have done has made a difference, that contributes to your research performance and research.
You recorded a podcast, and that's going to get distributed. So I think that's it.
That's
impact.
it. This is So it's interesting because impact for us, the way that Swinburne dictates it, is we've got to show that somebody has changed something as a result of something that we have done. So they would count a podcast like this as engagement.
Engagement, yeah.
So I could make a case that the millions of listeners to your podcast.
And there are millions of them.
Definitely. Highly intelligent people, no doubt, is engagement. So the impact would be if one of those listeners wrote to you and said, based on that fascinating podcast and those insights that I got, my company completely changed our strategy of whatever, and now we have X more profit or something. That's what we class as impact. So those three things, your academic outputs, your income, and your impact narrative or statement, combine to give you a research performance score. And based on that, over a rolling 3-year average period, you are given a research allocation. Yeah. So more research means more time for research. It's sort of, the bit of the double jeopardy idea. People who are doing lots of research get lots of research time, and those people do more research, they get more research time.
Yeah, it's very difficult to go back. In fact, I don't remember seeing anyone come back from teaching. And it's one of those things that I feel, probably a lot of people in industry wouldn't understand, especially my parents don't understand. I work for a university, and they think that all day, every day, I'm in front of a lecture theatre full of students, and I'm just talking nonstop about marketing concepts. And they really don't understand the nuances of our job, that it involves like a whole lot of time involves prepping for those lectures and then marking the students' work, but also the research side of stuff and the key differences between someone who's allocated quite a lot of time to research and someone who's a lecturer, for example. Do you find the same thing?
Yeah, definitely. So, and I've got a lot of friends who are high school teachers, for example, and the amount of time that they are in the classroom in front of students is a lot higher than I am.
Pretty much all of their time.
And it's most of the day, all day, and all week.
Yeah.
And so it's quite a different model, which can be hard to explain. And as you said, I've also got friends who are in corporate consulting roles, and for them it's this sort of strange idea of not constantly working on projects. That there is time for teaching, and then there's also time for personal development, or that research can be learning about a new topic as much as it can be actually crunching numbers or writing reports or those kind of more tangible things.
I think that's it's one of the aspects of the job that we have is there's such variety in it. I never find myself getting bored. And, you may have those days where you're like, oh, I'm really sick of looking at numbers today. But you have to get to a certain point. And if you want, you can kind of switch to the writing aspect, or I'll just switch to the doing sort of more commercial research sort of things, or better catch up on my teaching. Like you can switch between tasks, and you have quite autonomy being a researcher.
Yeah, and this is what attracted me away from corporate consulting. So when I first graduated from my undergrad, so I did a Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Commerce. I did psychology and marketing.
Okay.
And I went straight to work for a market research firm because that to me was the combination of psychology and marketing, understanding why people do what they do, the brands they like, why, all those kind of things, and applying some of that statistical research knowledge you learn from psychology fit really well. But what I realized was that as a full-time research consultant, I was at the beck and call of my commercial clients, and it was the kind of place where you're given the work phone, and your work phone is expected to be on you at all times. And so if the company had I put in quotation marks, crisis, they could contact you at any time, and we were expected to be able to respond. And so a lot of that, what I found was, we did some fascinating work, but it was always the work that the clients were interested in. So it was they had an idea, or if we had an idea, we were trying to sell them on it. And so a lot of my time was not dictated by me. It was, this project is on at this date because my client has a national presentation to all their stakeholders, whatever it might be. And so the academic industry really appealed to me for that autonomy. And then what I found was that there's this really nice, and what I see as, I guess, emerging part of academia, which is, to me, almost a perfect middle ground, which is academics who are highly trained and have really inquisitive minds working with the right industry partners to solve big problems, not just necessarily, which color should we use for our discount tickets or whatever, which are important questions commercially, but trying to solve what I see as, I guess, bigger, longer lasting problems that are not something you could do in a month-long standard consulting project. And that to me is really appealing. I like that space, and that's the space I'm trying to play in, I guess.
Yeah, and that's sort of the beauty of doing a higher degree by research to begin with. Like if you're doing a master's, you get 2 years, or if you have a PhD, you have 3, maybe 4 years to really spend that time thinking about that topic. What are the issues with the previous research? How can I address that? I'm going to collect data. I'm going to make sure I analyze it correctly and come out with something quite useful for filling the academic hole, but for also industry as well. There's not really a whole host of other places where you can allocate such a big chunk of time to then answer a bigger question. If you do like a commercial piece of research, it may be a 2-month stint between acceptance and final presentation of it. And that's applying knowledge that's already discovered. But academic research is, spending quite a long time, sometimes a year of reading a bulk of literature, which is a small part of what we know about marketing or any field really, and then spending the next 2 years trying to contribute to it. I mean, I think it's quite a unique and fascinating thing, and has to be a certain type of person though. Like otherwise you get bored of it, you become discouraged, or not motivated or something like that. So you have 2 PhD students of your own at the moment that I'm aware of. There may be more. How are you finding being a supervisor and being on the other side of things? Yeah,
I've got 4 PhD students at the moment, all within their first year. One of them is actually an iPhD student. So this is a program we have at Swinburne, which is for people straight out of undergrad. And it's a 4-year program where the first year is honours, the second year is the master's, and then they have the option of going for a PhD confirmation or a master's mid-candidature, and they can exit after the time. And so the idea of that is that it's rather than students doing an honours somewhere on one topic and then having to find a new supervisor and that kind of thing. So one of them's in that program, which is quite interesting. But to answer your question, I'm really enjoying being a supervisor. It's definitely a different experience, but I'm not that long removed from my own PhD that it's nice to, in a way, give back. And I'm trying to be so I'm always the most junior supervisor on the team because we're not allowed to be the main supervisor until you've shown that you know what you're doing and got a student successfully through.
Which is fair enough.
I think so too. I would be terrified at having someone else's whole study and career in my hands. And so I'm trying to be that the supervisor that's always around and accessible, and the one that is happy to chat through things and almost get it up to the standard that then we show the main supervisor, because I don't want to, you just sort of don't want to, I'm going to say waste the professor's time. It's never a waste, but you don't want them spending their time doing really basic stuff if that's something I can pick up. Yeah. And so, it's to everybody's benefit to have the more senior people on the team thinking about the bigger issues than it is, the minute details of questionnaire design or something, for example. I found that really enjoyable. And it's also enjoyable just as a way of seeing, getting new ideas and seeing different takes on topics, areas that I've been working in for a long time, and just seeing with fresh eyes how somebody else sees the big issues in that area. So I've found that really rewarding as a way of getting me excited about the discipline and the topics that it's fair to say when you spend all that time doing a PhD on it, you can get a bit over it by the end. Yeah. And it was actually said to me that that's when you're ready to submit. When
someone else's problem now.
Yeah. When you hate your topic, you've spent enough time with it. So it's been nice to have people come in and be doing things that are, not repeats of what I had done, but related in some way. That's how you end up being a supervisor. It helps get you re-excited about, the broad topic areas, which is nice.
Yeah. I have a similar experience to you, I suppose. I think you finished your PhD roughly about a year before me. I finished about March last year.
Yeah, May 2017, I was awarded it.
Yeah. And, I've started this supervision role as well. So I've got one PhD student and a couple of masters. One's due to submit in about a week, actually. So I just read her full thesis from start to beginning, which was, really nice to see, to be like, I've invested 2 years of my time and effort into this student, and oh my God, they're actually going to produce something, and this may just pass. Like someone else may find this interesting and worthwhile. And so I'm quite excited about that. But I found my role, because naturally I'm the most junior supervisor on all three of those teams, to be very much the same that you've experienced. I kind of have seen the role as a bit of a filter for the professors, because it's not wasting their time, but if they're thinking about, this table doesn't look very nice, I can't picture the results from this, or this is written so poorly, or like the ideas are good, but the writing's not quite there, someone else should have helped them with academic writing, for example, which is a unique beast, or referencing properly, or structuring their thoughts, like they haven't thought up here, changed it a thought, then revisited that thought, then they can actually contribute to how is this meaningful and how can it fit into the greater scheme of things? Because that's only what you get by being, a professor having, 15, 20, 30 years of experience. And so I completely agree with you that our role really is to, all right, we have a student, they're very new to academic work. Can I filter out what their thoughts are, which generally tend to be pretty good thoughts, and give them to a professor? And so do you find yourself in supervision meetings of your students with the big professors sort of being like, you kind of feel like you're the student again because you're that filter? Yeah,
I explain it to some people as I almost feel like the older sibling, and then we're fronting up to our parents, yes. And I've seen this before. It's almost like the younger sibling's not allowed to date till a certain age, and then the older sibling's gone through it and is sort of like, here's sort of the ways to get through some of these challenges.
I like that analogy. I'm going to steal that one.
Yeah. So it's a bit of that, so it's sort of like I still have that responsibility of being the supervisor, but it's a bit more of I've just gone through this. I know what this is like. I know what you're feeling. Let's get through it together in some ways. And that's quite nice.
Yeah. And also, because we're younger, we don't have the professor title, we're less intimidating to, like, PhD students, for example. So they're more likely to share with us the issues that they're having, the troubles that they're having, and seek those solutions. It would be very intimidating to go to your primary supervisor, for example.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's useful to have those different kinds of people and the clear roles. Like in any team or any group, it's useful to know what each person's sort of role and what they can contribute best. And I think that's, as the recent graduate, a lot of that can be the support person when and almost a conduit between them and some of your more experienced colleagues.
Yeah, definitely. So how did you find your way into marketing? Like, I just gave a presentation to Swinburne University for like your marketing and management group. And I sort of said, when I was growing up, my dad kept telling me, Zach, you're going to be an accountant, you're going to be an accountant. And then I realized that didn't sound very exciting to me. And I really kind of like the business aspect of things, and in particular the marketing. I sort of found myself drawn to it, but that was, pretty much the end of high school. And then I subsequently did a business degree at UniSA. No one wants to grow up being a marketer, right? I'm assuming you didn't either.
No, so I was pretty convinced I was going to be a psychologist.
Okay.
Hence doing the psychology degree. I think if I look back as a kid, like, people confused me. I was I've always had a very logical approach to things, logical, analytical kind of things, and so people confused me in that we are often not logical and rational. And so I think I was really drawn to the idea of psychology as a trying to get an insight into how I worked, how do I think, how do other people think, and therefore how do I interact with the people. And then so I had, even up to when I was applying for uni courses, I was convinced I was going to be a psychologist. And I did the arts commerce double degree essentially because I could. And I thought, well, maybe I'll want to open my own psychology practice. And so having a business understanding would be useful.
Okay,
right?
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. And so then as I progressed through, one of my first, marketing things was about consumer behavior, consumer psychology, like these kind of things that you learn early in the marketing majors. And I realized that they were just talking about applied psychology. There was similar theories, Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of stuff, and just applied to what we buy and the brands that we like and all of that kind of stuff. And psychology, as the degree progressed, became more about, abnormal psychology, counseling, all of those kind of things. And I realized I was a lot more interested. My favorite psychology unit was social psychology, how people operate in groups and how they operate around each other. And I realized that, to me, like, marketing was the application of social psychology. You think about some of our most famous marketing theories talk about social norms, the pressures from others, and all of those kind of things. It was like, this is business psychology. This is a perfect combination of what I'm actually interested in, without having to deal with people's problems, if you will, which is a lot of what formal psychologists are doing. I was like, I'm much more interested in understanding why people buy what they buy than I am, doing the sort of counseling roles that are hugely important. But I realized that I was not the kind of person that would be great at those roles.
Definitely. So you've wanted to start out, being a psychologist, moved into being, maybe I'll open up my own clinic, I actually know something about business, realised that there was a bit of an overlap between the two. During your sort of higher education sort of move through there, was there any sort of, we can point to sort of moments in our life that we've sort of taken a bit of a direction, and usually they involve other human beings. And you're like, I really enjoyed this lecture, or I've seen someone present, or maybe I've read a book, for example, and you're like, I see why I want to change, or now you've become more inspired. Has that moment happened to you at all?
Yeah, so there was a couple of those kind of things. And one was that, through doing psychology, you get a very strong background in research and the collection of data, how to treat data, how to analyze data, a lot of things around experimental design. So a lot of our assignments in psychology were randomized control trials, do something to some group of people, something else to others, and compare the results, and are they statistically significant, and all of these kind of things. And at the same time as that, my mum actually writes a textbook on how to use SPSS.
Really?
It's the SPSS Survival Manual.
I have to look that one up.
Yeah, it's the world's best-selling SPSS textbook.
Wow.
And
what's her name? We'll give her a plug.
Yeah, so this is Julie Pallant. It's my inheritance, so please buy the book because, that helps me. So I had this really strong ability in using and analyzing data.
You'd hope so.
Yeah, and what I realized was that a lot of people in business didn't so much. A lot of people, and a lot of the other students I was working with, not scared by numbers, but definitely weren't as comfortable with data analysis as I was. And so I actually started, my first ever job was as a stats consultant to people who had data and didn't know how to use it. And so they would pay me by the hour to, take an Excel database and run some what I considered relatively basic stats, creating averages for males and females and doing a t-test to see if they were significantly different. And I realized that they valued that a lot because they were seeing this data, wanting to make sense of it, and I was doing that. And so then by chance at Monash, where I was studying, was the group, the ACRS, which was formerly the Centre for Retail Studies. And they were at an event that was rewarding students for doing well in certain units. And I had done quite well in marketing research because it was how to do SPSS. Yeah. And, I had the textbook writer in my house. So that was quite an advantage. And
what a very unique position.
Yeah. So there was this event where, it was like, here's the top students in each of the different units, and here's these different companies who, it was a networking kind of thing. And so the ACRS, who was based at Monash, were there, and I started chatting to them, and they're like, "Oh, we actually need like some casual, research assistants. We've got lots of data. You're telling us you're very good at doing data. Do you want to do, a day a week while you study?" So this was during third year undergrad, and so I started doing it, and I saw what actual, practical marketing research was. And again, it was this idea of, well, I'm trying to learn about people, which was psychology, and I'm trying to interpret the data, which is the stats. And so the combination of those things was pretty good. So that pushed me down this path of marketing research.
Do you remember who approached you at the event?
Yeah, so it was Sean Sands and Carla Ferraro, who funnily enough now work here at Swinburne with me. And Sean ended up being a groomsman for me when I got married. So we've known each other for, it would be close to almost coming up on 15 years now. Wow. And Sean became my honours supervisor, and he was one of my PhD supervisors. So yeah, that meeting at that networking event really pushed me down the path, had a huge impact on me.
So would you say that Sean played sort of a mentoring role for you?
Yeah, definitely. So his birthday is a day after mine plus 10 years. And so I always say to him, he's just me in 10 years' time. And And so he's an associate professor here now. And so, yeah, he's been a good someone who's doing the kind of things that I saw myself doing, being an academic, publishing in academic journals, but also doing industry engaged work, also doing, presentations for corporate audiences, going to industry seminars as much as he is academic conferences, and being in the media and all of those kind of things. Definitely has been someone I have, seen what they've done and taken parts of and evolved in my own way.
And how important would you say, having someone in that sort of, whether it's a formal or an informal sort of mentoring role, how important do you think it has had an effect for your career? So I've spoken to a few people already about this, and, it's sort of really helped shape their thinking, and they don't necessarily go to the same person with the same problem. In fact, I've been told that the more normal model is having almost a cluster of informal mentors, a bunch of people who you personally respect. Doesn't necessarily matter if other people respect them, because at the end of the day, you're the one getting feedback, but naturally other people find them respectful as well. But more in terms of I have a specific problem about, maybe it's the corporate engagement, I'll speak to this person about it. Maybe it's the academic publish, I'll speak to someone else about it. Do you find yourself having a group of people that you consider mentors and you go to specific problems, or is it that more traditional role where you have one person and you go to them, or maybe two?
Yeah, I think the cluster idea is right. And as you said, not even necessarily as a formal agreement, but just people that you or that you see that are doing the kinds of things that you want to be doing. And sometimes it's not even that they're directly giving you advice. You can observe a lot of what people are doing, the way that they work, or the type of things that they're doing, and take a lot from that, even without having to necessarily even know the person. So you can see people out there doing certain things and take from that, I like this bit or I don't like this bit. So personally, I have a formal mentor here at Swinburne who I've known for quite a while, and that came about actually informally, where it was just someone I knew for quite a while, back to when I was at Monash. Is now one of our associate deans here. And when I got the job and started, I just reached out and said, we'd love to catch up. And we just started catching up for lunch sort of every month. And it almost just evolved where I just, at one of those times, it's sort of like we first start dating, which for me was like 15 years ago. So I'm very out of practice. But it's sort of that moment where you go, are we together now? It was the similar thing where I just was like, are you my mentor? It wasn't a formal, I identified someone and said, I want you to be my mentor. It just happened organically. Yeah. And then I was like, I think you might be my mentor. Is this how you see it as well? And it evolved from there, which was nice. The other thing that we have here at Swinburne is within our department, we have Professor Lester Johnson, who's been doing academic stuff forever, as he says. And he's got a formal part of his role as research mentor for our department. So he often and openly says, that we should go to him with research ideas and he'll be sounding boards. We can go to him with half-written papers and he can, suggest things. He can go with about to be submitted papers and he puts his editor hat on and does all of that kind of stuff. So that's a great resource for us. And we also now have a new teaching mentor program. So people who have won, either uni-wide or national teaching awards will go and, sit in your class and talk about, what was your objective for this class and how did that go and all that kind of stuff. So quite fortunate to have those formal programs in addition to, the network of people that you just see and look up to.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of great advice for potentially some of the, people who are early in their career, some of the younger people listening to this, or someone sort of in their mid-level, I suppose, is look out for those formal mentoring opportunities within the organization. Some good, really healthy organizations tend to have those in place, and I take advantage of them. But also those, I remember thinking to myself, well, there seems to be a bit of a relationship between people who have mentors and their success. So it must be important to have one, but that's going to be super awkward. I don't want to, excuse me, knock on someone's door, can you mentor me? And that's not really how it goes. And, talking to myself 5 years ago, I would have been like, it's even a silly kind of thought, but it's kind of nice for people who are listening who may be thinking that's the way it goes, is maybe just about organizing an initial meetup or someone you respect, and then kind of making it a semi-regular thing until before you know it, they're kind of in that informal mentoring kind of role. And if you're a good person and people enjoy your company, they're quite happy to catch up with you for coffee. And if they think you're a good person, they're happy to help you do better because, we're social human beings and we like to support those around us. As you would know, Mr. Psychologist, Dr. Psychologist.
So I mean, that exactly happened to me with Professor Sharon Rundle-Teely, who's the head of social marketing at Griffith. We met at a conference because I was in one of her students' presentations and made a suggestion, and she happened to be sitting in front of me. We had a chat. We started working on some things, and now we've been working together for a few years. And I go up there, a couple of times a year, and we talk about all sorts of stuff just because we've spent a lot of time together working on things. And so I would consider her an informal mentor. It was never a plan. I never had plans of working in social marketing. It just happened. So honestly, I didn't even know about their group or her or what she was doing before then. So definitely wasn't a deliberate, I want to learn from this person. It just happened organically. And I think that's the best way most relationships or opportunities happen. Even in business networking, I've always hated the idea of cold calling. I've never found that's worked or been successful for me. I've always found it's been better organically of putting yourself out there and trying to position yourself in the areas that you know or are passionate about, and you end up connecting with people that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost serendipitous in some sense. You asked a question or proposed something in a student's presentation, and before you know it, you've had this direct conversation and influence on someone who, I quite admire. I'm very well aware of Sharon's work and the incredible team that she's managed to build up in Queensland at Griffith University. Something to very much admire. She's built an entire team based around social marketing, and I'm not entirely involved in that area, but I kind of see her as kind of the leader of that in the entirety of Australia, and definitely making headwinds in globally as well.
Yeah, I think what I really like about what Sharon's done with the social marketing group is that it's become very self-sufficient. And so what I mean by that is a lot of the people who are there have been funded by grants that, Sharon or the team have got. And so they're not relying on, agreements from the uni or from specific places. They're doing high quality, good work that people value, and that is how they survive. To me, what I take from that is I look around the environment, and the expectations of unis, I think, are evolving a lot. And in my mind, rightfully so. To me, I understand the criticism of the ivory tower kind of idea. And to me, that's not a sustainable model. I wouldn't want to be, and I don't think there should. I don't think there should be a lot of people who are just doing, random research for their own interest. I don't see how that is necessarily benefiting a lot of people, and therefore, why should that be funded by governments or unis or students or whatever? And so to me, I look at myself and I go, well, I don't want to be relying on my job being from, funding or student numbers or any of these kind of things that might be outside of my control. I want to be self-sufficient in that I know what I'm doing is valuable because I'm working with people who value it and are showing that value. So I think that's what I have really admired from that group is their way of continually doing stuff that is valued by their communities, the partners they work with, and the government. They've been really successful at big government grants. So it's something I certainly look up to.
Yeah, and whenever you are in one of, whether it's Sharon's presentations or one of her students, I'm always sitting there in the audience thinking, this is, it's good quality research to begin with, and they always present well, her team actually. But you can see how this has academic rigor with some sort of real world application. Mm-hmm. They're solving a real problem. They're solving how to reduce, domesticated dogs from attacking wildlife. They're trying to reduce the amount of food waste people have, whether it's from discarding food that or parts of food that should actually be consumed, or reducing food waste because people are buying too much. Mm-hmm. They have a lot of good causes, and you can go and you walk out of there feeling like it's something to be proud of. That there's a group of people, and I think everyone in marketing is doing something they should be proud of. Don't get me wrong, but they're the feel good stories. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it also feels good to be involved in that. So
yeah, true.
I just had a paper published with them in the Journal of Social Marketing about the food waste work that they were doing, and I applied some of the techniques I had learnt through my PhD around modelling how people change and what the driving factors of that were. To dive into some of their data, which is tracking people over time as the result of social marketing campaigns. And it gives you a nice sense of I had nothing to do with the design of the study or the actual, they spend a lot of time out in the communities. I can't claim...
They spend a lot of time out in their communities.
They do.
They're kind of the polar opposite of ivory tower research.
Yeah.
I bet they spend maybe a day a week. It just feels like they're out there all the time.
Yeah. And so I can't claim any of the impact of the actual program, but it's nice to be at least have some association with a group of people who are using their powers for good, if you will, and it feels nice to have that outlet for research as well.
Yeah. So you mentioned your PhD research there, and it was all about tracking reasons for differences in behaviour. Mm-hmm. Did you want to run us through a little bit more about your PhD? Maybe what was the issue you were trying to solve, how you went about solving it, and ultimately what you came up with. And I guess that'd be very interesting for both audiences here in terms of who the podcast is listened to. And then maybe a couple of key takeaways, how can this research help you?
Sure. So through my consulting work and then working at the Centre for Retail Studies at Monash, I'd worked with a lot of retailers and retail brands. And at the time that I started with my honours, which was 2010, it was really, I guess, not the start, but where a lot of the discussions... where a lot of the discussions around the role of different channels in marketing, and particularly the channels that consumers could shop through. And by shop, I mean not just purchase, but search for information and all of that kind of stuff. And so one of the things that I saw was a lot of profiling around different kinds of consumers like to shop through this channel or that channel, or, there are people who are in-store shoppers, there are people who are online shoppers, there are people who search online and then purchase in-store. There was a lot of these kind of profiling things. And what I noticed even just from my own behavior is that the way that I shopped with particular brands evolved over time. I might discover one brand through a physical store and then eventually discover their online store. And once I know my size, maybe I only shop online from that point. And so this raised this question to me around, well, I had observed anecdotally that, consumer behavior through channels evolves. And my question, I guess, was, is that something that holds across, larger customer bases? If so, is it something that we can predict? And then the third question being, if we can predict how people are going to change, can I influence it, right? So can I know that here's this group of customers who are doing this certain behavior, but in a month or 2 months' time, given the trajectory they're on, they're probably going to be doing this kind of behavior. If I like that, can I speed it up? If I don't like it, can I stop it? So that was essentially the general idea. So I used some data from a North American retailer who had tracked all of their interactions with customers across 3 brands over 2 years. And what I looked at was customers who were new. So I wanted to say, well, I can't observe, at least in this data, what people did before that time period. So I was like, I'm going to look at customers who are new to the brand within that time period and how they evolve over that 2-year time. So how frequently are they shopping? Which channels are they shopping through? So are they online? Are they in-store? Are they using catalogs? Whatever it might be. How much value are they spending? And also, what are they doing for browsing? So how often are they going to the website, not buying something? And what products are they looking at? All these kind of descriptors of their behavior. And so I applied a technique, it's called the hidden Markov model, which essentially groups people into hidden states. So think of like a segmentation kind of idea. But the idea is that I can't perfectly know anybody's state at any given time. I can only infer it based on what I observe about them at that period in time. So in any given month, I'm inferring that somebody is either, for example, an active online shopper based on the fact that the database captures that they visited the website a certain number of times. Okay. And then what it does is track people over consecutive time periods. So from 1 month to the next, or 1 quarter to the next, or 1 purchase to the next, do we observe similar patterns of behavior for each individual? And if so, we would say that they've remained in the same state. If I observe different kinds of behaviors, I would say they've changed state or transitioned, as it's called, right? So give you an example of that. So in one given month, if you took a particular retailer or a series of brands, you might notice that I bought 3 things and it was all through a physical store near my house, right? So that you might say I'm a low-value in-store shopper for that time period. Then in the next time period, you might notice that I start buying a lot more, but it's through the online channel, right? So then I might be a high-value online shopper. And what's interesting then is, well, what changed? Was that something about me? Did I change? Or did something that the brand did cause that change, right? So for example, in my personal experience, I realized that when I was in a physical store, they were out of the size of the business shirt that I was trying to buy. So the shop assistant said, well, if you give us your email address, we can send you things, or you can go onto our online site, whatever it is. And so that was the shift for me, where I suddenly discovered the online channel. Then they started sending me all of these online-only sales, right? And so what they've then done is, from making me someone who goes into store, tries lots of things on, I've now become, I just buy the same things I've had before in the size that I know online for often half the price. And it's actually quite interesting, because in that way that they've actually lost potential income from me because they've encouraged me to do a behavior which is not as valuable.
So they've lost the opportunity to cross-sell.
Yes.
And they're also selling you what you would have normally bought, but at a discounted rate.
Correct. And
so they've lost 2 ways.
Exactly. And so when I'm online with a specific brand, I'm filtering to the product category that I'm interested in, then I'm filtering to my size, and I'm probably even filtering to style. So I'm literally only seeing maybe 5 or 6 potential products. Compared to if you've got a good physical retail store, you would hope that I'm seeing lots of different things. I'm having some kind of experience. Maybe the shop assistant is suggesting things to me or providing me some kind of service. So that was the general idea around, can we predict which customers are shifting in which ways? And then is that influenced by what the brand is doing with them? And the answer to both questions was yes. And essentially what I was able to show was that given historical data about the customer, I could predict which type of shopper, so which state a customer would be in for their next 3 purchases with over 80% accuracy. And that was heavily influenced by the communication strategy of the brand to that shopper. Okay. And so the message being, if you're a brand or a retailer, one, you need to acknowledge that customers change. And so when you're doing any kind of customer profiling, it has to be dynamic. And what I mean by that is it can't be, 3 years ago, they filled out a survey that told us these were their needs or their life stage. That's got to be something that's updating constantly, because any slight shift could have massive impacts. I've had a son, my first child, 4 months ago. That has so hugely changed the product categories I'm interested in, the frequency I'm shopping, the media I'm consuming, just everything about my life. And so if you had built your profiling on me 6 months ago, everything's now wrong. So that's message one. Message two is that not only should you be tracking it, you should be predicting how those things are going to change, right? So looking at what are the determining factors that are driving these changes, and when I can see those start occurring for individual shoppers or segments, then I've got to know that their behavior or their states are shifting accordingly. And then third is thinking about how are your strategies actually driving those changes, and are they driving them in beneficial ways? And beneficial could mean for that individual in a social marketing context. Are we doing campaigns which are encouraging good behaviors? If we're talking about like a commercial setting, often what we find is that brands and retailers are actually doing things which are making their relationships worse, and then finding that out later, but they've actually caused it themselves. It's
hilarious that you should mention that. Some people who are not 100% around how marketing works, which is most people. We kind of get seen as these evil people who manipulate people. Turns out not a lot of them actually are good at it. In fact, they're so evil that they're bad at it. And this seems like the exact same situation.
Yeah, great example of this was I was trying to buy a mattress about 6-12 months ago for a spare bed. And we went online and we were researching different mattresses. We picked one that we thought we liked. We put it into our shopping cart, and then we thought, we were late for brunch, so we've got to go. We left. By the time I got to the cafe about 15 minutes later, I had already been targeted with an ad that said, hey, here's $100 off that product, right? And so there is an algorithm or a system that has been built that assumes because I've put something in my shopping cart and left the site, I've abandoned it. I've given up on the purchase.
Yeah.
In fact, I was just leaving it there because I was going to do it later. And so now I, as a consumer, super happy, $100 off, brand/retailer has lost $100. And so there's a lot of unintelligent intelligence systems going on.
And you see that quite often, especially for sort of like some food retailers. It's like, oh, we've noticed, because if you scan your loyalty card for the retailer, we've noticed that you really like this brand of milk or this halloumi, or, perhaps you've bought randomly some item of chocolate bar. Guess what? We have the items that we know you like and love, and here they all are on special. And it's like, so you think I'm going to buy them, and now you're wanting to give them to me cheaper. It seems a bit counterintuitive. To them, it's like they probably want to attract the sales to their store rather than another competitor. but it doesn't seem all that smart of a strategy to me.
No, and I think a lot of those cases, it's just get out of the customer's way. They're already doing something that is good for them or good for you, then let it, get out of the way. Just stop trying to change stuff. It's more than if we observe behaviors are going the way that we don't want. So if somebody is suddenly decreasing their physical activity or decreasing their consumption of fruit and vegetables or wasting more food, then that's a discussion point around, well, what could an organisation or a council or a government or whoever it might be actually do to prevent that negative change and shift it towards positive behavioural change?
Great. I think we've got a pretty good overview to that sort of your research there. Is that something that you've continued to work towards in that sort of area? And if so, did you want to give us a bit of an inside scoop as to what you're working on now? Yeah, so this is exactly what I've been, where the connection with social marketing at Griffith Group came, because I had this thinking and this model that I was working in the retail space around predicting people's change and determining whether that was driven by marketing activities. And if we think about social marketing as a context, and I'll preface this with I'm not a social marketer or social marketing expert, but it's about, from my understanding, applying marketing ideas to positive behavioural change, right? And so that is the area that we're working on collaboratively of going, well, can we get better understanding of who has been impacted by this social marketing campaign and why? So something that you see from a lot of these things is they work for some people and not for others. If we could get a better understanding of what the individual characteristics are of why this person changed and that person didn't as a result of a campaign, then we can either better target people next time or we can better design the campaign to account for a broader variety of people. So the paper we just published as an example, we found that one of the big predictors of whether this campaign to reduce food waste was effective or not was about whether people had access to a garden. So if they were living in a house that had a garden, then they were more likely to improve their behaviour than if they didn't. And so as part of that, I guess, when we go back and think about it, is around, well, the access to, compost, for example, or that they're living it. Maybe that's a proxy for the type of suburb that they live in. So it's that interesting then question about, well, what is it about that factor? Other things that we see are level of people's perceived ability to actually use leftover food. So then maybe it's about teaching people how they can actually use half a capsicum, not throw it out. Yeah. So I think that's the fascinating thing for me is that extension of that idea about which people are changing and why, and therefore how can we use that for positive benefits as much as we can in the commercial setting for increasing profits. Excellent. So one, I quite enjoy reading, and I mostly read for learning as opposed to pleasure. Like, I don't tend to find myself reading, sci-fi books or anything like that. Is there a book sort of with any sort of marketing sort of skew? It doesn't have to be entirely marketing because you have the psych background, that you would recommend people pick up? Something like I can point to this one book everyone should go and buy it. I'd love to have a good you should go have a good listen.
Yeah. Okay. So
good read.
I'm gonna. This is going to sound strange. I'm going to preface this with, this is a book I have not read yet.
Okay.
It's on my bedside table to read, but I heard a really detailed podcast with the author who talked all through it. And the book's called Range. It's by, the author is David Epstein. And so Epstein, however you want to pronounce it. He's a guy that's worked a lot with Malcolm Gladwell. And I love all of the Malcolm Gladwell books. One of my favourite books of all time is Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've
read about the first half.
Yeah, right. And so this is an extension, almost an extension of that idea where the the subtitle of the book is How Generalists Succeed in a Specialist World, right? And it's this idea, what he's looking at is this assumption that we have, I guess, as general societies now, that the way to get ahead is pick an area, specialize in it, and spend your entire time doing that. That's the quickest way to get ahead, right? Think about this with sports. It's like kids training to do one sport from 4 years old. As academics, I remember as a PhD student, I was told if you ever want a job, you have to pick your area, you have to pick your method, your topic, whatever it is, and be known for those things. You've got to specialize, right? And what essentially this book is about, and what this author's been doing, is trying to dispel some of those, what he thinks that's actually a myth. And so he's looked through...
I love a good myth-busting book.
Yeah. So looked through a lot of very successful people in various settings and finds that the vast majority have actually come from generalist backgrounds. They did not specialize. They were more generalists. So think about this as the successful CEOs of companies who have come from completely different fields. Or he uses the example of, Roger Federer played lots of sports as a kid. Now, the counterpoint to this that people always point to is Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods only ever played golf and was for a while, the best golfer in the world. But essentially what this book is saying, or what it finds through reviewing lots and lots of different cases of this, is that being a generalist, having had a generalist experience, is better in the long term than being a specialist is. Specializing is a way to get to somewhere quickly, but it's less sustainable. So if you think about kids who have only ever played the one sport, have an advantage at early ages, but a lot of the truly elite athletes were multi-sport athletes as they were growing up. Why I like this general idea is that I see myself as a little bit of a generalist where I'm interested in lots of different things. So I always pushed back against this idea of having to be known as a thing as an academic. Like, I don't want to be the online shopping guy, right? Because I think there's so many fascinating topics. I would rather have a variety of different skills that I could apply across settings depending on what the most relevant or interesting thing of the day is.
So you don't want me to introduce you to this podcast as Jason, the online shopping guy?
Yeah. Well, so this is a funny one because when I do media stuff, they say, can we call you online retailing expert? I'm like, I'm fine with that, but I don't want to be known as just that.
Yeah.
I do know a bit about online retailing, but I also know a bit about consumer psychology and also general marketing theories and that kind of thing. So that to me is a more enjoyable future than having the one niche area. Because the risk to me of being the expert in online shopping, as an example, is that what if that's going to be superseded by something else? We're not going to need, I don't think, online as a thing soon. It's just going to be, you can already just do it through your Google Home. So is that online? I don't know. Your fridge can order the milk for you. So I don't want to be pigeonholed into a topic that may in the future not be relevant.
And that's a really good point because I'm currently going through an early career researcher sort of program that the university has set up. And they were talking about, Category 1 grants, so the government grants, the ARCs. And they were talking about how their topics come in and out of fashion. And so they'll have funding for a team, and then that comes out and they lose people. And then they get funding for a team, and they come out and they lose people. They get funding for a team, and they've kind of got these waves that they have to ride throughout their career because they're so specialized in one area. But if they were known across more or had a more wider scope, almost like Sharon's model, where it's kind of funded by industry and government, like Category 2 grants, then you can have a more long-term sustainable career as opposed to the specialization, good for a short period of time approach that you mentioned.
Yeah, I think it's finding that balance, right? Because obviously, like Sharon and the social marketing group it's social marketing, so that is a specialization. But within social marketing, they're not just doing food, or they're not just doing exercise. They're doing all aspects of. So it's more that they've got this general way of thinking. They've got this way of thinking which is about using marketing for social benefits that can then be applied across heaps of different settings. So I think that's, to me, where the optimal idea is. So having some enough specialization that you're not trying to do everything, but also not saying this is my only area I will ever do anything in.
Yeah, I think it's a bit dangerous to kind of pigeonhole yourself into something, because as soon as no one needs it or it's not wanted, see you later. So you mentioned that, obviously you met Sharon and the team through conferences and stuff like that. Conferences, I find one of the best benefits from them is, apart from being exposed to different knowledge and different ideas, which is always useful, I think, in science, regardless of, I kind of like listening to non-marketing science as well, because I find it interesting.
Often easier to read.
Yeah.
A lot of, I find like physical exercise kind of things, because I've got a lot of knee problems from playing volleyball, and I will read like sports science journals about treatment of patella tendonitis and find it easier to interpret than some marketing journal articles, because
some of them are very difficult to digest.
So difficult. And look, I skip over the bit about how it's some particular protein that's doing something, whatever. But, a lot of the thinking around just we got these people to do this exercise regime, these people to do this other one, and this one was better, is a lot easier to interpret sometimes than some of the, very complicated things that we see in marketing journals.
Definitely, which is, I think, really important for, whether you're in academia or industry, is to read outside of your field, but also to attend conferences, because you get to meet new people. And, that's some of the ways I've met some really interesting people, and ideas have sparked, collaborations have sparked, or, you'll see something in their research, you're like, oh, that might be beneficial for me. So you do attend, I know I've seen you at ANZMAC quite a few times. Do you attend ANZMAC? Are you going ANZMAC this year?
Yeah, so I try to get to ANZMAC every year, because it's the sort of local one. So you see the people that and always meet a few new people, but it's sort of our local playing ground, I guess. So it's nice to know who else is within the local region. Historically, I've tried to get to an international conference at least once a year as well. At the moment, with a 4-month-old son, that's more challenging. So I'm not going overseas this year, except if you count ANZMAC being in New Zealand. Or
as they like to call us in Australia, we're the West Island.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. So I'll try to get over there this year. I like to go with the international one, like try to either do Europe or something North America, because they're just far away. And some different ways of thinking, and often I've noticed, like, our industries here in Australia will often follow what's happening, particularly in the US and the UK, but also Europe. And so it's interesting to get over there and see what people there, when they're working with their industry partners, are dealing with, because sometimes you can get a bit of an insight in the type of things that might be affecting our Australian market in the near future.
Excellent. Well, I think that's probably a pretty good note to end on. I could probably chat with you for at least another couple of hours, and no worries. But as you know, I've got one of your PhD students to go meet up with. But on that note, thank you for your time, Jason. And I very much look forward to seeing you at the end of the year in Wellington. Windy City or something like that?
Windy City. I've heard there's a bit of a craft beer scene there.
Amazing.
So that's good. But yeah, no doubt see you there. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Anytime.
Hey guys, it's Zac Anesbury here with just a couple of quick reminders. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, then make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. There are plenty more interviews to come with some of the world's leading marketing academics and practitioners. You do not want to miss these. In the meantime, if you're looking for another way to connect, then follow me on Twitter at Zac Anesbury. That is ZACANESBURY for my take on the marketing issues of the day.